A gute Woche, a gesunde Woche. We are standing Motzoi Shabbos Parshas Noach. I would like to begin by sharing the following riddle. There was once an elderly person that owned 17 sheep, 17 shepsalach. On his deathbed, he requested that after his passing, half of them should be given to his elder son Reuven, a third of them should be given to his middle son Shimon, and the ninth of his possessions should be given to his youngest son Levi. And the old man passes on. And obviously we all know that 17 cannot be divided in half, nor into a third, nor into a ninth. So they went to the Chacham of the village. The elder hears the problem. He goes into his barn, into his backyard. He gives his own sheep. Now you have 18 sheep. Perfect. He tells them 18 sheep is divided into half. Reuven is going to get 9. 18 sheep is divided into a third. Shimon is going to get 6. And 18, a ninth of 18 is 2. You're going to give 2 to Levi. Now let's add this all up. 9 and 6 and 2 is 17. Perfect. And the remaining sheep, this elderly Chacham took back. Now this indeed is a tremendous lesson for all of us. Ubehegdem. Bechlal in life, as we all know, and life is dynamic and there's constantly new situations coming up, which presents constantly new challenges. There are certain people whose personality is to become acutely aware of the new problem. And they'll come and let you know that this and that is a problem. Problem-oriented person. It's a nature. You have another type of person, another complete personality. And that is that when something arises, when there is a new challenge, obviously noticing the problem is really not that difficult. It doesn't take a chacham in the vast majority of cases to be aware of the challenge, but this is a creative personality. They realize they see the solution, a solution-oriented person, and they'll come to you and they'll tell you, listen here, this is the solution for the current problem. Indeed, in this week's Parsha, when the Torah is recording the challenge that Noach had after the Mabul, and he dealt with this challenge by drinking wine, the Torah records that at a point he got drunk and he was completely unclothed, and his youngest son, Cham, walks into his father's home, problem-oriented person. He sees the problem. He goes out and he tells his brothers, Shem and Yefes, listen, Dad is drunk. What does Shem and Yefes do? Tells the Torah, Vayikach Shem vayefes es asimla, that he took the garb. Who is the he? Shem and Yefes. And as the Torah records, solution-oriented people. They walked in there respectfully, and they covered their father's nakedness. Comes along Rashi, quoting the Gemara, asking the obvious question that the pasuk should have read, Vayikhu, that they took the simla, they took the garment. Indeed, they did. Why does the Torah speak in the singular Vayikach? Tells us the Gemara that really Shem was the one that took the garment. Nisametz Shem. Shem was the one that implemented the solution. When he began to implement the solution, Yefes came along with him. In other words, what Rashi is teaching us is that there isn't only two types of personalities. Yes, you have Cham, the prototype of a problem-oriented person. You have Yefes, solution-oriented person. But there is a third category, and that is the essence of Shem, from whom we descend. We are the Semites. Shem wasn't only a solution-oriented person. Shem was a solution implementer. Shem was the solution. How many times does it happen in our lives that when we are not the problem-oriented person, when we see the solution, but we conclude that the solution is for someone else to modify their behavior? And it could be that it's true, that the solution could be someone else doing what they are able to do. The greatness of Shem wasn't only that he was a solution solution-oriented person, but Shem viewed himself that he is the solution. He implements the solution, and he attracts all other solution-oriented people to join with him. Well, there's a beautiful story that's shared by a Yid by the name of Aaron David Newman. This was an interview that he gave to Gem in 2013, sharing his life story, that he was born in 1934 in Vizhnitz, Ukraine. And as an infant, his family moved to Antwerp, Belgium. Before the war, there were more than 50,000 Jews living there, a beautiful, large Fruma community. He says when he was 6, 1940, the Germans invaded Antwerp, and he remembers his earliest childhood memory is running for his life with his family to France. Now, they had his mother's mother, his Baba, belonged to the Lubavitcher community in Marseille. So they were from the few lucky people they had whom to run to. And they arrived there. And indeed, they had a roof over their head, but there was a tremendous amount of real hunger. There wasn't enough food. Later in that year, when the Germans invaded Paris, when many Yidden ran to the south, including to Marseille, it was an impossible situation. And the way his family decided that they will survive and not, God forbid, die from mamish starvation was that the family was divided, and this young 6-year-old was brought to an orphanage, to a Jewish orphanage in Marseille. He relates the story in 2013, remembering memories of that orphanage. There were approximately 40 to 50 children, had no parents. He says night was hell. Children would cry themselves to sleep, calling out for their father and their mother. He remembers how he felt fortunate for having parents. He knew that they're alive. He was simply there for food, but it was a very difficult moment in his early childhood. He says in 1941, a stranger who no one knew, they did not even know his name, they called him Monsieur, Mister, comes to this orphanage. In his hand was a bag of French baguettes. He would bring with him tuna fish, sometimes potatoes, and this mister would feed every child in the orphanage, many of which were not eating, not because of the lack of food there, but because they were depressed. He remembers how he would speak to each one. Children that were depressed, he would sit on his lap. For some children, he would sit mamish on the ground to connect with them and to feed them. And this went on for many months. Every day, Monsieur would show up with his French baguettes, and he says many children literally are alive because of the efforts of this mister. Fast forward, the war is over, he's reunited with his parents, they move to Williamsburg. In 1957, he decides to go and have a yechidus with the Rebbe. When his great moment finally arrives, when he opens up the Rebbe's holy door, he looks at the Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe tells him, das is Duvidle, which was the name that he was called in the orphanage. And at first he says he was shocked. How does the Rebbe know that he was called as a child Duvidle? But as he's looking in the Rebbe's eyes, he realizes that the Rebbe is the mister, the Rebbe is the monsieur that came to the orphanage for all of the months that the Rebbe was in Nice and in Marseille getting visas to come to these United States. The Rebbe heard of a problem. The Rebbe knew of the solution, but the Rebbe wasn't only solution-oriented. The Rebbe was the solution. And indeed, when we hear about this story, it resonates within us because we are the descendants of Shem. We all have in our lives those areas in which we are not only solution-oriented, but we know that we are the solution. And it is this week's Parsha that is challenging all of us to expand that. Good is good, better is better. Let's figure out in which other areas in our lives that we can not only be solution-oriented, but we can take the responsibility on ourselves and be the solution in our homes, with our spouses, with our children, with our parents, in our communities. And v'oid v'hu ha'ikr, like the Rebbe told us so many times, that we know that there's a problem. The world needs Mashiach. Mashiach is the solution. Up until a point we felt, well, Mashiach, that's something that the Rebbe has to bring about. That's something that God has to bring about. We know the solution, but the Rebbe told us that we have to be the solution. That indeed it is within us and our actions, b'koichenu, to do like the Rebbe says, to add a little bit in Torah, to add a little bit in mitzvahs. And coming back to our riddle, we all have to sacrifice something. We all have this shepsela, give up something for the avodas Hashem. Give up a little bit of sleep, give up a little bit of a yetzer hara, give it up. And this will be the solution. My action and your action will be the solution. Together we will indeed bring Mashiach, which is the solution, and we're going to bring into this world a healing, and we're going to bring into this world a light, and we're going to bring into this world godliness, which is the purpose for which we were all created. Chevra aguta agezunta freile chavach.